Hey guys, I've been getting a lot of calls from you asking about what's the deal with the $414 million in unused PUA and FPUC funds. So I wanted to take this time to clear up some confusion and explain how the process here in Washington, D.C. actually works. So unlike the CNMI legislature, which has the ability to reappropriate unused funds, like those local poker fees that gets reappropriated, federal appropriations doesn't work the same way, okay? Congress doesn't have the authority to just move around unused money or allocate money on the fly. Let's be very clear. The law requires that any unused PUA or FPUC funds allocated for unemployment compensation must be returned to the U.S. Treasury. All claims for these funds had to be filed by 2022. So in other words, that money no longer exists in the forms that we're talking about or we're hoping for. This isn't just my interpretation, okay? Both the U.S. Department of Labor and the Congressional Research Service has affirmed this. Now, currently we have a draft legislation in the works and we're waiting on technical assistance from the U.S. Department of Labor to see how we can strengthen this bill. And if necessary, we might need to go back to request more information from the CNMI governor to support a new appropriation and strengthen the case for the bill. Now, what the governor is really asking for is a standalone appropriation bill. So I want to explain the scenarios in which this happens, okay? So Congress typically approves standalone bills for three different reasons, okay? Reason number one, sometimes there are what's called emergency spending bills, okay? Now, these are bills that are passed when there's a national crisis, like the pandemic, for example, or a war or a natural disaster. PUA and FPUC were originally funded through the CARES Act because of COVID-19. However, without an ongoing national emergency like the pandemic, it's unlikely that Congress will approve new emergency funds. The other way is through a supplemental appropriation. What's that? So let's say, for example, there's a natural disaster like a typhoon or the California fires, right? And Congress appropriates funding for that natural disaster. If Congress finds out halfway through that the money is not enough, they will basically pass a supplemental appropriation to cover the additional funding needed to address that disaster. The other way, which what we're considering is a single issue appropriation, and this happens rarely, where Congress passes a bill to fund a specific priority, such as veteran healthcare, border security, or military operations, okay? And a recent example of this is the PACT Act, which basically provided funding for veterans exposed to toxic burn pits. I also want to be very honest about the political climate here in Washington, D.C., which makes this type of request very challenging. Right now, there's a strong focus on reducing federal spending, cutting the deficit, and eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse, which makes it very, very hard right now for Congress to approve any new federal spending, especially spending related to the COVID-19 pandemic, which actually officially ended in May 2023 when President Biden and the World Health Organization declared an end to national and public health emergencies. In fact, the administration has already started canceling pandemic-related grants for health and education, as we have been hearing from our public school system and CHCC. So given all this, asking for additional money for the CNMI is going to be a tough sell. But despite these challenges, I'm not going to back down because that's not what we do. I'll continue to push forward, advocating for measures that will bring additional resources and help to the CNMI. And as we progress through this process, I promise to remain transparent with all of you so that there's no false hope about the likelihood of securing this type of funding for the CNMI. I will keep you updated every step of the way. And I want you to stay engaged, stay informed, And like my brother JD Tenorio says, stay sucker-free, sinamay. I love you. Until we chat again.